Hello, everyone. Welcome back here to the Azure Task channel. We are here with Kate Mattix. Hey, Kate, welcome back.
Hey, George. Glad to be back.
Yeah, that's great. Amazing to have you here. We're just having some conversation before we start recording, and we just had KubeCon, I think 2-3 weeks ago, and so many news. That's why we are here to talk about the new Istio integration finally on AKS. Fully supported add-on. Yes. Well done.
Yes.
Well done. That's why you came to the team. Yeah, I knew it. We recorded last year. We recorded last year about the Gateway API. I think it was amazing. And if you haven't watched, this video is on the channel. Subscribe the channel here, hit the notification bell. And there is a video from last year, a few months ago. We recorded about Gateway API. And Katie was talking about how are you going to do Gateway API and mesh integration? And it looks like that thing's happening now. Welcome.
Yes,
and Kate is the engineer lead now. Congratulations on the promotion as well. And different from last year. And I'm a cloud developer advocate on the cloud native. And it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Yeah, again, super happy to be here. Yeah, I had a blast recording that video about Gateway API. And yeah, so many exciting things happening. We've got multiple service meshes implementing the Gateway API spec now, and yeah, maybe we should do another video sometime to give everybody an update on what's going on the Gateway API side. But yeah, it's really great to be here. Excited to talk to you about our Istio add-on on AKS.
That sounds great. And if you don't know, Katie is the lead now for the upstream on Azure on AKS for the mesh. Then we are talking with the right person. And if you are from the community, you are from Microsoft, also we can help him. You're going to see that there's a lot of things that we're going to discuss that we need your help, then stick with us. There's a lot of information here. There are also the presentation that Kate did at KubeCon, I think was recorded. It's public now on YouTube.
Yes, there's the panel session that I did at KubeCon was recorded. I did a couple of different panels, and those are all available for you to watch on YouTube now.
I'll make sure that I put on the description of this video, then you should watch this one as well. But let's see what's going on. Let's have more like a free, casual conversation here with Kate. And go ahead, share your screen. I have my question here. Be ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's get started. So yeah, like George said, I'm Keith, and want to talk to everybody here about the Istio-based service mesh add-on for AKS. So the first thing I want to discuss is why a service mesh. A lot of times you'll hear in the industry of people talking about solutions, but I think it's very important to talk about why. What are the problems that we're solving? And so a lot of organizations these days have learned and are in the middle of learning that cloud native microservices unlock untold like new levels of resilience and flexibility. You can scale each service independently. You can use whatever language is right for the job and have a mix of different languages in your stack. And product teams can own the end-to-end lifecycle of just their own services. And this has created a lot of productivity and return on investment for some of the largest organizations out there. But what does this mean for service owners? Now that the product team who is focused on providing that value, on creating the business logic that's powering the services for their organization, they are now tasked with owning that end-to-end lifecycle, which is great. They don't have to go through as long and exhausting change management processes, but there is some new things for them to grapple with. There's now a network in between each service that team has to own in the services that they're communicating with. That network presents a trust and obfuscation boundary. Now, every time I make a remote call, there is the possibility of somebody listening in to that traffic. I now don't know where that traffic ended up. How can I validate that my traffic ended up where I wanted it to? Furthermore, the network doesn't understand software code. The network doesn't understand the programming language. It's just bytes on a wire somewhere. And so it's difficult to get that observability that we're used to when you're working in a monolith. There's now this need for these service owners to handle traffic management, observability, and security for their service service communications. And so historically, there are a couple of different approaches that we see that service owners have taken to try to solve these problems. The first one that was very prevalent in the mid to late 2010s was to embed this logic for traffic management and observability and such into fat client libraries. Frameworks like Java Spring Boot and Hystrix and things of that nature have all of these tools, all of these pieces of functionality built right into the application. So you use the right library with the right decorator or the right inheritance mechanism, and you're instrumented with all the different observability that you need. Or, that approach worked for a long time. But what people notice is that, okay, now I don't know where my client library starts and the actual wire starts or stops. I don't know where this particular setting was enabled enough to dig through multiple layers here in order to figure out what's going on. And then one of the biggest things people ran into was that, this works really great if I stick to this one language, but what happens when I need this functionality both in my Java backend and my React JS frontend, right? Because I've got to duplicate that functionality in different languages. And for the lean startup or the enterprise going through a cloud native transformation, that's a lot to deal with. And so what we're seeing now are that people are finding a lot of value in handling all of these concerns, traffic management, observability, and security, handling all of that transparently via these things called sidecars that are responsible for these tasks. These things require this approach requires no changes to your actual application code, and your service owners can focus on providing that value and writing that business logic for your organization. And it's that latter approach that boils down to what we call a service mesh. It's a layer of a network layer that handles these layer 4, layer 7 concerns in a transparent manner. And Istio is one of the arguably the predominant service mesh option in the ecosystem. The benefits they speak for themselves. You can secure service-to-service communication in a cluster with TLS encryption, strong database authentication, and authorization. So to reiterate, you are able to receive encryption not just at rest, but encryption in transit when you're communicating through the service-to-service operations. You get fine-grained traffic control, meaning you can use rich routing rules, retries, failovers, and fault injection. All of these ecosystem best practices, you get them without changing a single line of your client code. You also are provided a pluggable policy layer and configuration API with access controls, rate limits, and quotas. And then lastly, you get new levels of observability, like metrics, logs, and traces for all traffic within a Kubernetes cluster, including traffic ingress and traffic egress. And we're very happy to tell everybody that Istio is a CNCF incubating project, and it's on its way to graduation. By the time you see this, Istio very well might be at graduated status. Who knows? But it's very close. This is just a testament to all the incredible work that maintainers of the Istio project have been doing over the past several years. And Microsoft is now proud to be a part of that amazing community, building this next generation of traffic routing and of networking within cloud native.
Okay, that's I think it's a key point there. Many people don't know, but Istio only came to CNCF a few months ago, and but you talk about graduation already. But people have to understand it's a mature product. Is only that joined CNCF only a few months ago, and we're not going to discuss why. But the important thing is we'll be graduating probably faster than other products because it's a product that's being used a lot. And joining CNCF, I think that's the very reason that we are here, that allowing Microsoft and AKS to support that. And when you talk about why using service mesh, I have some question where it's like, let me ask for the enterprise customer. Why need that? Why need that? Someone can ask, look, I don't have all these microservices. I'm not like Google. I'm not Microsoft. I'm not, AWS with hundreds or, Netflix with thousands of microservices. I don't think you need that, that number of microservices. But sometimes you have like your public API and you have your backend APIs there that only are available inside the network. Even if we have 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, doesn't matter. We still need some kind of safe communication between those servers. And I think still valid. Doesn't have to be fully microservice and to be using that. That's a assumption. That's correct assumption.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And so where we see a lot of usage and service mesh are maybe these large fleets of microservices, but that's by no means the only valid use case for a service mesh. You mentioned, for that enterprise, perhaps you're in a highly regulated industry and you're subject to things like HIPAA or PCI or FedRAMP compliance, and you have to show that there is, encryption in transit for all in-cluster communication. Without a service mesh, you have to write that logic yourself. You have to handle the certificate minting and distribution yourself. And for any security admins out there who might be listening to this, the second I say certificate distribution, a shudder probably goes through your back. It's a hard problem. It's a tough problem. And thankfully, Istio and service mesh in general, oftentimes, but Istio specifically, will provide you ways to rotate your leaf certificates automatically. You're able to follow NIST guidance and have short-lived certificates with a 24-hour expiry time. And Istio will automatically reissue their certificates to your workloads. That is, high levels of efficiency, high levels of security at very little cost or actually zero change to your applications. So there's, even if you're not running this huge microservice fleet, there is absolutely value waiting for you with using Istio, and specifically the Istio add-on for AKS. That's a great point, George.
Yeah, that's spot on, because working with enterprise customers, the certificates are a nightmare, and the security people always have to double check the compliance. They have to make sure that they're going to do like a full end-to-end encryption. I mean, it's not sometimes stopping on the load balancer. They want to be next to the service, and we used to do a lot of ending the encryption on the load balancer. And for those customers, that's not enough. We need the encryption to the application, to the service running on the container there. And I think that's amazing. And like I said, the 24 hours life cycle could be an extra layer of security, because people think, Sarah Young should be here because Sarah is from security advocate, and Sarah say, the hacker is always inside the company, it's not outside. If they are inside your network and they try, if you have short-lived certificates, you have another layer of security there. And that's what you're trying to create, multiple. I think when you say TLS, you're doing MTLS, a multiple certificate, means that the encryption is in both ways. You encrypt in both ways. I know who I'm talking, and the person knows that talking to me in both directions. That used to be very hard to do it, and it's still very hard to do it. And still, you need code change in both sides. And when you have something like that, you're kind of injecting that, without having to change your code or anything. I think that's amazing. And I like the comparison with FAT libraries. And there's a lot of people still using those FAT libraries. I don't want to compare with any existing new ones, but you have to understand what it says. Is it SDK or just a library that you created that share across the things? What's the life cycle? Like security, if there is some security problem, you need to update your code tomorrow. And then if you have just to replace the sidecar, just one component, without having to redeploy your application, that's a big advantage for the company. Like banks, big enterprise, they have to respond very quick for like a security problem. And like imagine if there is any CVE on TLS or any, a library that people are using on these things, we need to quickly update. And I think those are the reasons, those are the pain points. Don't think about service mesh, think about what we are fixing. I think it's amazing. But let's go ahead. Loving that.
Yes, absolutely. All great points. And so all of this stuff I want to tie it into exactly what we're going to be providing, what we are providing today on Azure. This is kind of the introducing these Istio Service Mesh add-on. What we're giving out of the box today that you can go try it out in public preview are Istio versions. This one version today will be adding multiple versions in the future, but we are testing and verifying that these versions are compatible with supported versions of the Azure Kubernetes service. So no longer do you have to do that validation yourself. AKS is doing that additional level of checking to make sure there's compatibility there. The scaling of the Istio control plane is going to be configured and handled by Microsoft. We've got horizontal pod autoscalers that will add more Istio control planes that control your service mesh without you having to change anything. We can automatically do some adjustments of AKS components like core DNS. As we see network traffic going up, we can change that because we control both components. We verify the external and internal ingress setup. You can either have an internal load balancer, external load balancer, or both. And soon we will be adding support for Gateway API load balancing on Ingress, where you can create it dynamically. We should do a video on that too, George. And on the monitoring side, we verify that this add-on is going to work with Azure Monitor Managed Service for Prometheus and Azure Managed Grafana. And stick around, we're going to be doing a demo of that right here in this video. So stay tuned to see what that integration looks like. And of course, just like any of our other add-ons and our other products and experiences on the Azure platform, you will be getting official Azure support provided for the add-on. Microsoft Azure, our product group, is going to be right there working with you when things as things inevitably go wrong with any software running on any machine ever. We're going to be with you to help you take care of that. So that's what we are providing. Go ahead. Yeah,
just to go for just to make sure people understand, that's in public review at the moment. We're trying to move to GA as soon as possible. And if you are a customer that that you're going to use Istio, just contact us and see how you can help the project if you want to use in development for now and give feedbacks for us. And that will be amazing. And that's going to help the project to go GA as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's a fantastic clarification. I think I like to tell people that alphas, betas, public previews, these are all superpowers for users. Doesn't seem like it, but they are superpowers because those are the times where you have the most voice and power to change things. If you've got use cases you need us to prioritize, if you have feedback of things that you'd like to see, please try out this Istio Service Mesh add-on and let us know, because that helps us make sure we create the best product for you.
Sounds great. I did install my cluster and I noticed that core DNS was kind of adjusted. It was nice. Like you say, it's kind of scale a little bit more to make sure that's supporting everything. That sounds great.
Yes, 100%. Again, we run, have the add-on running on AKS. You got the people who run AKS who are involved and who are designing these features, so they're able to put in their own recommendations for how to scale core DNS. So that's one less thing for you to have to worry about as the user, and we're happy to provide that experience. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through a couple of demos here and kind of in three parts. In this first part, we're going to walk through the creation process and enablement of the Istio-based Service Mesh add-on. I'm just as a quick overview, what we're going to see here is the creation via the Azure CLI of a new AKS cluster. And then we're going to enable the Service Mesh, the Istio Service Mesh add-on on the on that new cluster. So this means that you can enable the Istio Service Mesh add-on on existing clusters, as long as you're not running open source Istio or another service mesh on the cluster, then you will be good to go to run this on an existing cluster. So let's start to take a look here and see how this is going to work. So we're going to run AZ AKS create, and I've got some, the resource group and test cluster name here, and it's going to be a 3-node cluster. And we see that this is spitting out the managed profile of the AKS cluster. And then once that's done, we can we're going to take a look at what the test cluster name is and the resource group is, just so we're completely aware. And then we're going to run AZ AKS mesh enable. That's a new first class subcommand in the Azure CLI to be able to enable the Istio service mesh add-on. And so these are the same Azure tools that you're used to, the same ecosystem and support that you've experienced that you're used to. Now you're able to manage Istio with those same tools. So that's going to run, again, for a little while. And then you'll see that at the end of it, again, we get the managed cluster profile spit out. And I don't think I scrolled up here, but you can see the mode Istio at the top, indicating that there is a service mesh installed inside that managed cluster. Next, we're going to get the credentials for this cluster so we can kubectl into it. It's going to add the the location as well as the credentials to our kube context. And so now we'll be able to run kubectl get pods to be able to look at all the pods in our cluster. And you'll notice at the very top in the new AKS Istio system namespace, there are now 2 pods as part of the same deployment called Istio-D ASM 1-17. Istio-D, again, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the Istio control plane. This is kind of the brain of your service mesh that programs all the various sidecar proxies within the cluster. And you can see that 1-17 piece of the name here. That is the minor version of the service mesh that's running. As new versions become available, you'll see more different names for the control planes as they're created. But in this particular demo, we're running the 1-17 version of the Istio service mesh add-on. So after that, we are going to look at those 2 pods that have been created. And that is the first step. So again, you see that you can create the service mesh add-on on a new cluster and on an existing cluster, excuse me. And you'll see these Istio-D control planes in a new namespace.
That's great. That's very simple. Just create a class as enable like a add-on. And I think that I looked at the documentation at the moment in public preview. There are some restrictions the way that we upgrade those. There's Istio. That's something that you are pretty sure working at the moment, and you'll be available soon. But if someone want to join the public preview, make sure that they talk to us about how the upgrade is being done at the moment. There are something on the documentation, but don't be afraid. You'll be there, and then I think that's one of the priorities, that make sure that the life cycle, the day 2 operations of the Istio add-on will be fully managed soon, but there are some restrictions at the moment.
Yes, we want to make sure that we are testing everything the best that we can and providing the best overall experience. So you will see some restrictions on the documentation. We'll talk about a couple of those throughout this demo. But rest assured that we are working as quickly as we can to get all the rich functionality of the Istio service mesh out to all of our customers in the add-on. So for the next part of our demo, I want to introduce you to the book info application, or rather the book info architecture. This is a kind of a sample setup within the Istio community, in the Istio repo, and it really does a good job of showing you all the different pieces and all the power of a service mesh. So in this scenario, you've got 4 different applications. You've got the product page that then pulls information from the reviews service and the detail service. And that review service is going to pull information from the rating service. And the really cool thing I want to point out here is that notice all the different languages that are present here. You've got a Python product page, and your reviews are served in Java, and you've got your details page in Ruby, and your ratings pages in Node. And I think that this speaks really well, or rather, it speaks to the realities for a lot of the startups and especially the enterprises out there who have gone through transformations, who have gone through lots of pivots and changes in their stack. I'm a big believer as a software engineer using the right tool for the job. Sometimes the right tool 10 years ago was a different language, and the right tool in 5 years is going to be a different language. And what we're going to see here is that the power of the Istio service mesh is going to allow you to put all those tools together and program the traffic between them from a single pane of glass, which is really cool. Also, I want to draw attention to the fact that there are 3 different review service versions. These are, Istio's got this really cool support for canonical versioning, and so you can change the percentage of traffic going to reviews version 1, version 2, or version 3. You can failover between versions and that sort of thing. So again, really great demo. I think it's really representative of our great sample applications, representative of the problems that lots of people in our industry are facing. And now we're going to deploy this demo and see what it looks like to configure some of the traffic here and expose it publicly.
That sounds great. This demo is exactly what people have in mind in enterprise. They always have multiple language. There is no point to rewrite those things. They're going to inject new problems. And it's always a problem to have one library that will be supported by all the language, and you have to maintain the code. And that multi-version as well is a problem that they have. They never had the possibility to have multiple versions and split the traffic between versions or something, or like to do a canary deployment. And even like a legacy application, if you use a service mesh, you can have that. That's what is a selling point for mesh, but it's a very important one. It could be leveraging all these new possibilities of a mesh, allowing that on the enterprise, even like a monolithic, even using just APIs, it could be doing that, because it could breaking apart your monolithic and don't have to rewrite the whole thing. Like you said, just rewriting one API, and now you inject a mesh and you have all these done with multiple versions and everything. Only that slide, I think, is one very appealing reason to use mesh, in my opinion.
I completely agree. It's why I took this slide to show exactly what we're going to be deploying, because I think it really, people who see this are going to see their organization. They're going to see the past 10 years of their organization. They're going to see the next 5 years of their organization and see all the different things that they may have to consider when evaluating software choices. And I think it's important for people to see that a service mesh fits in whatever kinds of scenarios that you're having to deal with.
Yep. And if you are a startup and you don't have that, you're going to have in 2 years. You're going to have this problem soon. And you're not going to stop using like Rusty, another language, just because you don't have a framework to support multiple languages, and now you have. But let's go. Loving that.
Exactly. All right. So now we're going to look at installing the sample application, how we can do some configuration to expose it for so that we can curl it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to label the default namespace with istio.io/rev equal ASM 1-17. ASM is kind of a code word for the Istio service mesh add-on. And so that's this is showing you a feature of Istio, or leveraging a feature for revisions, where you can actually specify what revision of Istio gets injected into the namespace. And so when you've got multiple versions in your cluster, this is going to be a really awesome way to have more fine-grained control on a per namespace or even the per pod or deployment level of what version of Istio of the Istio sidecar gets deployed. So we're going to start off and label this namespace with the 1-17, and we see, okay, great, it's labeled. Next, we're going to apply all the various manifests for that sample application that we just saw in the previous slide. They're hosted in the upstream Istio repo, and we're just going to do a kubectl apply directly from that repo. And so we'll see here that the pod, the deployments, the services, and the service accounts are all created for that book info application. And then when we do a kubectl get pods in the default namespace, we'll see that just about all of them are ready. We're waiting on that last one lagging behind, but at that point, we are good to go. We see all the services are, all the pods are ready for us to get to work. And yes, notice that for each, you notice the number of containers that are in each pod. So with your typical application, there'd just be one container. Actually in the upstream manifest, there's only one container that's declared. But because Istio is injecting a sidecar, you'll be able to see 2 containers in those pods. And don't worry, my computer is it's charging right now. So the next step that we're going to see is the AKS mesh enable ingress gateway. So again, notice this is that same subcommand within the Azure CLI, and this is we've got this enable ingress gateway command that's going to provision a ingress gateway within your cluster. And there is a flag for the ingress gateway type, and that flag can take 2 values, internal or external, and you can have both going at the same time. But this is going to, like I said, provision an ingress gateway inside the cluster. We're going to scroll up here actually and see that within the service mesh profile, you see the ingress gateway component that's populated with a single gateway with mode external and its enablement flag set to true. So again, Azure is managing the provisioning and the scaling of the ingress gateway for you. And so now that we look at the profile, we can look at the service that was created. That service is being created, notice in the AKS Istio Ingress namespace, separate namespace than where the control plane was, but a Azure managed namespace in your cluster. You will almost never have to create or manage things within this namespace. We see that this is a load balancer service that's created, and it's got an external IP. Because the type was external, for when we created the ingress gateway, this is going to be accessible from the public internet. So on my laptop, I'm going to be able to take this external IP and, well, actually, first, before I do that, I almost forgot a step. The way that you expose a gateway, like a service, via a gateway in Istio is via the gateway in virtual service resources. So this you'll see this gateway resource that's going to select the Istio Ingress Gateway external service, and we're going to expose it on port 80 for any host on the HTTP protocol. Quick clarification that this is not a gateway API gateway. It's kind of confusing. Istio has a couple of different gateways, but this is the Istio gateway resource. And then we'll also create a virtual service resource to tell Istio how to route traffic based on the URI that's being requested. So you'll see for any host, this gateway will take traffic. We specifically bind to the gateway we created up here. And then we are going to match based on the /product page or /static or /login. And so you're able to see here, even in the sample application, some of these best practices to where, yes, we allow any host, but we'll explicitly match on these specific paths. And I want you to start envisioning your open API specs and translating that into Istio virtual service resources. So we're going to create those 2. And now that they're created, we can go and get the resources. There we go. We can get the virtual services and make sure that it was created. And then, yeah, we're going to take a look here and see all of the various configuration that's here. And it's going to route all of these different requests, all of these different paths to the product page service. That's the secret sauce there, is that match from those sets of routes to the product page service. Then we look at the gateway that we looked at before, and we see the hosts on the particular port and saying the HTTP protocol. So now comes the fun part. We're going to set some environment variables so that we can keep track of the host. And what this first line does is it's going to go and grab the external IP of that load balancer. And then we're going to grab the port. and we're going to add a variable to get the entire URL and put it together. And so now we're going to grab this, do an echo to make sure you've got it all correct. And what do we know we do? HTTP // with that IP address on port 80. And we're going to curl the /product page path. And we're going to grab that URL. And we're going to curl it and make sure the HTML renders correctly. And whoops, I went away before you could see the payoff. But the you see that the title there was able to be found, and that means we've rendered valid HTML, and that we were able to request our service, our product page from the public internet from my laptop into your Kubernetes cluster. And so again, I want to show you how, all things considered, you have to create, craft 2 resources for yourself. No application code changes were necessary. The services were injected with their sidecars based on a namespace label. And so for you for our product team, there are 2 steps required, right? It's just creating those gateway and creating those that virtual service resource. And again, I want you to start envisioning how this fits in your workflow. That gateway and that virtual service resource can be part of your GitOps pipeline. They can be part of the processes, whatever way that you're sending your application deployment to the cluster. You just bundle it with your virtual service and your Istio gateway. And now you've got this repeatable setup following the industry cloud native best practices for exposing your application to the internet. And we only expose one application, the product page. And so compared to doing MTLS yourself in your application, this is remarkably simple.
Yeah, and just for people to understand, Keith, is using HTTP to the web page, but once the web page is accessing anything on the back end, all that communication is done using TLS, because injecting a sidecar and doing all the magic that the mesh does. I think it's good for people to understand that. Looks like using HTTP just for the web page, but all the communication inside with the microservice are done in a safe way. But for sure, in production, you're going to use HTTPS for the web page as well. But all the management, all the complexity to manage all that communication between the servers, doesn't matter if it's 100 or 5 or 10, is managed by the Istio. Another thing is, if you're using another mesh, or even if installing the Ingress controller like Nginx yourself, like we have Nginx, a fully managed version, but you have to manage yourself, or you have to pay for the fully managed service Nginx, and this one gives you like out of the box Ingress controller that there's no extra cost for that.
Yep,
it's something
exactly
to consider as well.
100%. And
you don't have to enable the Ingress. If you want to use the fully managed one, you still can. It's called external. That's why I think you said on your previous slide that you could use the external one, just for people to understand. But you're giving options. Yeah.
Yes, you can do external, that's public internet, or you can use internal, that's only accessible within your VPC, or within your private network. So you've got a couple of options, or you can use both for different applications and use the gateway resource to select which services are exposed on which gateway. So you've got all the flexibility in your hands with Istio. And to kind of nail home what you were talking about, George. Yes, for simplicity, I didn't want to have to go and grab a Let's Encrypt cert and put it on the gateway. And so this particular request was not in this demo wasn't TLS, but every other line here. I mean, pull my pen up here. Every line, this line, and this line, and this communication, and this communication, and these 2 communications, all of these were using MTLS. So everything within the cluster was encrypted, even though just for the sake of simplicity, we didn't encrypt the initial request. So you still, yes, you can imagine attaching a cert to that gateway is a pretty easy process. It's publicly documented. So you can use your cert that you manage, that you've got locked away somewhere, and put it on that gateway, no problem. Okay, so now for the last piece of the demo, and this is what I'm really excited about, because we now have the Istio add-on on AKS as a a managed add-on offering. You're going to be able to leverage the power of the entire Azure ecosystem and combine that with the power of the Istio service mesh. And so we're going to see how that impacts observability here in this next demo. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the AKS update enable Azure Monitor Metrics. And so this is probably a pretty familiar command to many of you to enable Azure Monitor for our test cluster. So we're going to run that, make sure that completes, and we're good to go. Now we're going to have to create a small config in order to tell Azure Monitor to scrape Prometheus. A few months ago, Azure released the support for the managed Prometheus offering. We're going to be demonstrating how Istio works with that. So this configuration right here has some relabeling, and for all intents and purposes, you can just understand that it is telling Azure Monitor within AKS to scrape Prometheus metrics from each one of your Envoy sidecars. So we're going to create that locally in this Prometheus config file, and then we're going to create a config map called AMA metrics Prometheus config from that file in the kubesystem namespace. And once we create that config map, now Azure Monitor knows to read from Prometheus, and it's going to be grabbing that configuration immediately. But we have to do a couple of things first. We're going to go into the default Azure Monitor workspace that was created for us. And we're going to make sure that you as a user have monitoring data reader permissions. That's the key. And so we're going to go through here and give ourselves monitoring data reader. And I'm going to just select myself here in the Azure portal. And then once I am selected, I'm going to review and make sure it all works and assign that permission, wait for those permissions to propagate through it for the action to be completed, and then boom, now you have monitoring data reader. So what does that allow us to do? Well, let me back up just a couple of seconds here. Now that we've got monitoring data reader, we're going to be able to go into this Prometheus Explorer workbook. And the Prometheus Explorer workbook allows us to just write Prometheus queries and see the result within Azure Monitor. And so the most popular, most famous Istio metric is Istio requests total. And that is a metric that tells you the number of HTTP requests that have gone on and for any particular workload. And this is going to select, we don't have any labels that we're selecting, so it's going to look at all of the requests within the cluster, within the Istio mesh. And we're going to see this nice graph once it loads in. This nice graph within the Azure Monitor workbook to show all those Istio requests. So now we're going to take that a step further. We see this information within Azure Monitor, within this managed Prometheus. Now we're going to leverage Azure Managed Grafana to add a new dimension to our metric visibility. So we're going to create a new resource group and name it as Istio Grafana resource group. And then we're going to use the AZ Grafana create command to create a Istio Grafana demo managed Grafana instance in the new resource group that we just created. And so once that operation has completed, we're going to be able to open it up here in the browser. This is, you can see the name here, Istio Grafana demo. This is my Grafana instance. And then we're going to be able to go in, and you'll notice that there is a Prometheus data source here. That's we can add that data source, and we can. I remember when I was doing this that I've got to actually give Grafana some permissions. So similar to how I had to give myself monitoring data reader permission to be able to read that Prometheus information, so does the Azure Managed Grafana. And so here you'll see me give the resource that role, the monitoring data reader role, to the Grafana instance, and then refresh a couple of times to wait for that role to show up. I refresh, caches and all that fun stuff. So you wait for that to propagate through. But sooner or later it'll pop up, and we will be able to now finish out our data source population within Grafana. So we're going to name this the Azure Managed Prometheus, and then take that URL, the query URL within Azure Managed Prometheus, and put it into into that text box. We will authenticate with Azure Authentication, and all we have to do is save and test. And now we see, great, the data source is hooked up, it is working. So now we can do some exploration. We can open up the Grafana Explorer and use our newly created data source called Azure Managed Prometheus. And we can type in it's not auto-populated yet, but we can type in our Istio request total metric, not select any labels, and just run the query up here in the corner. And then see all these rich metrics from inside the cluster. And I want to take a second and get my laser pointer here and highlight all the different dimensions and labels of data that we have. We have the destination app. We have the cluster in which this originated. We've got the connection security policy, the destination identities, and many, many more. And you've got this table. I mean, just look at all of the rich metrics that we have access to. And this will enable you to create beautiful dashboards and alerts for when your application see dips in traffic. The world is your oyster. There is so much to be able to do to leverage the power of these metrics within your installations. And so we're not done quite yet. There are actually open source Istio dashboards that Grafana has on their website. You can go to grafana.com/grafana-dashboards and browse their selection of dashboards that are community maintained. And as an Istio member, a member of the Istio community, we work hard on pushing and maintaining some of these dashboards. And so you can go and grab this URL and then go into Manage Grafana and import the dashboard directly from that URL, and then load it up and import it. Oh, and then just select the right data source and import it, and then automatically you now have the Istio workload dashboard just there, ready for you, with zero work on your end. And notice how you can select the workload you want to see a dashboard for, and see how we've got some of these panels that aren't working quite right. But all the traffic is HTTP, so you're not going to see any TCP server traffic, but you can see the incoming success rate, the average request duration, like the P99 and P90, incoming requests by status code, and you can see, I want to highlight this here, just so you don't know that I'm not lying. Notice how Grafana can detect via Prometheus metrics that this is using MTLS. So that lock means that you are secured and the traffic within the cluster is being secured. Incoming success rate, incoming requests size by source, TCP connections. If you've got databases and such, you'll have the TCP metrics that are populating. But we're using HTTP right now, so that's going to be the HTTP metrics that we have available. P99. We can see it again, everything with locks on it, and you can see all the different outbound services that this product page is talking to. When I was working as an SRE, one of the number one hardest questions that we had to solve was, who has dependency on my service? Who is talking to my service? Who does my service talk to? And this dashboard can give you those answers instantly and have it graphed over time. So if you see a suspicious outbound connection you don't recognize, you can immediately respond to traffic that might be exfiltrating out of your system. And you've got these knobs. All of this is community maintained, community oriented, but because of how strongly Azure believes in open source software and open source integrations, you can leverage the power of these community maintained plugins just with no cost to you. So again, I think it's really cool that whether it's the Azure Monitor Workbook approach or the Managed Grafana approach, whichever one is your comfort, the Istio add-on for AKS will work for you via the power of Prometheus.
That's amazing. There's a lot of information there for operation, for the developers, for the SRE, like you said. And if someone is using like Jaeger to do the tracing, they can keep using Jaeger, or they have the same thing here. What do you suggest?
Yeah, so we are the AKS product team is working to develop or solidify a best in class tracing experience. So if you're using Jaeger, I always believe in using the tool that you are comfortable with. But if you have preferences, again, this is a public preview. Share it with us. Share us, what kinds of things you want to be able to see, what kinds of labeling and requirements that you have for tracing, and we'll be happy to take that feedback and try to create the best product that we can for you.
That sounds great. And if someone want to help with the Azure monitoring workbooks, for some reason don't want to use Grafana, and it's funny because Grafana is not managing the cluster itself. On this example here, was just installed to manage the things from Istio. Then you have options. If all the monitoring for the cluster is still on Azure monitoring, out of the box, that you could have a Grafana as well. You could integrate this Grafana with your cluster and have here all together the Istio information, also the cluster information, and use the same Grafana dashboard. But it's up to you. You can decide. And I like the flexibility, and that's what the customers want. They want that flexibility, and they can pick what they want. Amazing that.
100%, 100%. So yeah, I hope that that you've enjoyed this demo, and if you've got questions on anything you've seen, or you've got anything you didn't see that you'd like to see, then let us know. We're happy to create content, create docs, or create experiences for you. Wrapping up right quick here, I want to kind of leave you with some nuggets of wisdom and some best practices for how you can take your Istio installation to the next level and supercharge your adoption, supercharge your usage of the Istio service mesh. These are tips that come from my experience running Istio in my past organizations, from general communities, from people who are running Istio in large deployments. This is what they want you to know. Number one, use peer authentication policies to enforce strict MTLS as your teams can handle it. So Istio has this resource called peer authentication policy, and you can do it on like a per namespace basis, and that will allow you to say, hey, all communication in this namespace has to do strict MTLS. No plain text communication in this namespace. And if you can commit to zero trust or defense in depth early as an organization, Istio's got the tools to be able to help you do the gradual adoption as your teams are ready for it. But that commitment early on is going to be very important and very useful in getting consensus and continuing momentum of getting to that zero trust defense in depth goal that so many organizations have today. Number two, prefer full-fledged resources like virtual service and destination rule over annotation-based routing. I didn't even touch on the traffic shifting capabilities, version capabilities, specific outlier detection, regional load balancing that Istio supports. All of that power is in virtual service and destination rule. And while it may be tempting to use annotation to do versioning and stuff like that, it's going to be more robust and future-proof for you to use the full-fledged resource. And I'll add another. I'll chime in on another recommendation here for as we support Gateway API on the Istio add-on for Azure. That's going to be the future as well. So always prefer those fuller resources over annotations. Thirdly, go ahead.
No, just like the Gateway API, if you haven't watched it, there is a reminder. There is a video here on the channel with him talking about the Gateway API for you to understand what he's talking about. All the replacement for annotation to Gateway API that's coming. I think it's very important to understand because something is happening right now and it's going to change a lot of things.
Yeah, we're in the middle of we're starting the future today, and just to make everybody aware, Gateway API is the replacement and the replacement for Ingress, the future of Ingress in Kubernetes. And yes, we're doing some stuff to make Gateway API work with Mesh. That's very brand new. But be looking out for communications in the Istio community from the Microsoft community. That's going to help you on your journey of adopting Gateway API. Let us know if you have questions about that transition. Thirdly, use authorization policy resources to allow and deny traffic between services. So again, is yet another resource that Istio has that gives you the ability to control which services can talk to which services. So you don't want your, in most microservice applications, you probably don't want your very public user-facing application to talk to your super secret PCI compliant database, right? You can set up those rules that block traffic based or allow traffic based on identity, based on the service account in your cluster, or even using OPA policies with external authorization in open source Istio. You can do authorization policies specifically to use identity-based access control for your applications. And ideally, in a perfect world, we all know where those are, right? Those don't really exist. But in a perfect world, you ideally want to get to a point where you have a deny all policy that is the default, and you selectively allow traffic. That's really the defense in depth, highly hardened production readiness that a lot of organizations are seeking to try to accomplish today. The fourth bullet point, there are lots of progressive delivery tools that many of you watching this are probably familiar with, like Argo rollouts and Flagger. They all have support. Both of those have support for Istio, and that will allow you to do blue, green, and canary deployments for your applications, so that you can actually set it up to where you send 10% of traffic to the new version of your deployment, and you can check Prometheus metrics to see if the requests are failing before rolling that. And if they're failing, you can roll that deployment back. And so you can really make sure that when as you are incorporating continuous integration and continuous deployment cultures within your organization, you can make sure you're doing so safely by using Istio to power progressive delivery tools like Argo rollouts and Flagger. And then lastly, for maximum resilience and high availability architectures, you can investigate topology-aware load balancing within Istio to failover traffic between regions or availability zones and things of that nature. If Istio can detect that a particular region or zone is down, and so they do have support for that. And I encourage you, if you are running at that scale, look into how you can enable that, and come to us, come to Microsoft, and tell us your use cases. We can make sure that works for you. Lastly, I want to end with some even more exciting tales of things to come. There are lots of things that we have planned. Obviously, the first things that we are wanting to accomplish is to get this add-on to GA, and your feedback is going to help us do that. That's the number one thing that we're going to be looking for from you all to help us get the Istio add-on to GA for single cluster. As part of that GA specifically, we're going to be providing upgrade experiences for the Istio add-on to try to make sure that version SKU and upgrade experience is as seamless as possible. Looking a little bit past GA, or maybe even in parallel, multi-cluster service mesh experiences with Azure Fleet. Azure Fleet is something that is we're seeing a lot of people really excited about to bring their multi-cluster management to the Azure cloud provider level. And so Istio, I'm looking to how we can bring Istio to that. And like I mentioned, having traffic failover between clusters and things of that nature. Hosted managed service mesh with some auto upgrade and release channels functionality is another thing that we're looking to try to accomplish. And then we also want to try to enable some ambient mode support once it reaches stable and upstream. And this is something I'm very excited to talk to everybody about, because this is the breaking, hot new thing in Istio community right now. So if you're not familiar, Istio ambient mesh is, for lack of better terms, the sidecarless mode for Istio. We often refer to it as the future because we believe in making Istio boring. We believe in making Istio a part of your network infrastructure, and moving sidecars, moving the proxy out of the sidecar is going to help us do that. As great as sidecars are, there is still some complexity that you incur by being right next to your users, right next to your application developers' applications. And so when you have to do a mesh upgrade, you've got to restart the proxy. But by putting that in by putting the proxy into the node, and by stripping it of all L7 flexibility and doing it at L4, we're going to safely allow us to make the total cost of ownership much less for our users. And so that is something that we are working on in open source Istio. And as soon as we get that to a stable enough point where we're comfortable giving it to our Azure customers, we're going to allow you to use that and experience all the benefits of that lower TCO. I'm kind of running through some of these rapid fire mesh CA, where Azure is looking to try to manage the certificate authority and the certificate operations for your service mesh. FIPS compliant builds for all you FedRAMP people out there. We know how important that is to you, and we're working to try to get those FIPS builds out to you so you can use Istio in your highly regulated deployments. Azure portal experiences for service mesh. We all love a good visualization. We're going to want to try to. We're working to make Istio a first-class citizen within the Azure portal. Those dashboards that I showed in Managed Grafana, we want to try to provide those to you by default and curate them and make sure that's a seamless part of your Managed Grafana Istio experience. Integration with application insights for trace collection and querying. So again, you're seeing how we're looking to try to bring these Istio cloud-native experiences right at home, right to your home within the Azure ecosystem. SLO authoring, error budgeting, and alerting, all of that, we're looking to try to build that into our product as well. And then finally, there's been talk of Azure Managed L7 load balancer that's coming. And when that is out, you'll best believe that we're going to work to make sure that Istio is going to work with that load balancer as well. So lots of exciting things that we have planned on our roadmap. If you've got, again, things that you see missing, things you have questions about, feedback you want to give, please reach out to your nearest Azure contact, your MVP, your account manager, and give us that feedback so we can build the best product that we can for you.
That sounds amazing. This roadmap, I think we're going to move fast on that, I'm pretty sure, because there's a lot of interest there. The app insights for tracing is something people are going to ask. There are more advanced that's going to take longer, like ambient mesh. But I think multi-cluster with Fleet is something that's very appealing at the moment, and all the Azure portal and default dashboards for Grafana, app insights, and layer 7 load balance of Azure Managed will be amazing as well. Then we simplify things a lot, and I think that only brings AKS to another level. And I'm pretty sure that other services using AKS will be leveraging those, features very soon as well. We have so many products on Azure using AKS, and they're probably going to use that.
Yep, that's our hope.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and I think that's the next step. We can come back if you want another day to. Talk about Ingress, external Ingress, or those new things that are coming. I think people need, we can have some like a monthly, maybe recording here that we can show the progress if you want, or every 2 months, up to you. I'm more than happy. We both from Microsoft, and Azure, if you're not following, subscribe to the channel and notification that you're going to probably see a lot of things coming. If you don't have time, I'm happy to record as well, or anyone from your team. It's up to you, but we are more than welcome to come back. Please follow us and ask help. I'm more than happy to send the feedback for the team as well, and all the CSAs, all the Microsoft team that you have contact. If they need help, let them know that you watched this video. And they can contact us, and we can work with them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to get together as often as we can, and to share with everybody, all of our Microsoft community, all the stuff that we're doing, and answer questions that may be coming through, and just keep you updated with what's going on with the Istio add-on for AKS.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, Kate.
Thank you. Take care.